Listen here, lady. I've been around the block more than you've had hot dinners, and I don't need anyone telling me how to park my truck on my own damn land. That's how Hank, kicked things off in the quiet town of Green Valley, Kansas. At 65, I'm a retired farmer who traded decades of hard labor for a peaceful slice of life. I'd pictured golden wheat swaying in the breeze, a little veggie garden, and a handful of clucking chickens. But within 5 minutes of rolling into town, I was locking horns with Barb, the self-proclaimed community manager who strutted around like she ruled the place. It all went down when I parked my rusty old truck on the dirt road to my new farm. The house was simple but warm, a wooden haven surrounded by endless fields. I was unloading boxes, sweat soaking my shirt, when Barb stormed up. She had short, dyed blonde hair, giant sunglasses, and a clipboard she wielded like a weapon. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice cutting like glass. "Who are you, and what do you think you're doing here?" I set down a box, wiped my forehead, and grinned. "Name's Hank. Just bought this farm. Moving in today." Barb didn't soften. She sized me up, glared at the truck, then back at me, like I'd trespassed on her kingdom. "Do you realize parking that thing here breaks community rules? This is a peaceful farming area, not a junkyard." I blinked, caught off guard but steady. "Didn't know that. It's just temporary while I unload. I'll be done soon." She smirked, dripping with sarcasm. "Soon? You think we'll put up with that eyesore ruining our town's image for even a minute? Property values matter here." I felt a spark of irritation but kept cool. "Sorry if it's an issue. I'll move it as fast as I can." Barb wasn't buying it. She threw up a hand like a traffic cop and whipped out her phone. "I don't care what you say. I'm calling the police. You're breaking the rules and I won't tolerate it." I was floored. "The cops? For moving into my own house? Isn't that overkill?" She ignored me, already on the line. "Hello, police. I need to report a violation in Green Valley. There's a man illegally parking a truck, blocking the road, and causing trouble." "Yes, he threatened me when I told him to move." "Send someone now." I couldn't believe it. Threatened her? My truck wasn't even in the way. Before I could argue, my buddies Joe and Mike, who were helping me move, dropped what they were carrying and jogged over. "What's up, Hank?" Joe asked, gripping a wooden chair. I sighed. "Barb's calling the cops over the truck. Says I'm breaking rules." Mike scowled. "But it's your land. You're just moving in." "Exactly," I said. But she's not hearing it. 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. Sheriff Davis, a grizzled vet with a weary expression, and a young rookie. Davis glanced at Barb, then me, skepticism in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his tone calm but edged with frustration. "This is the 3rd time this month you've called us about neighborhood nonsense." "What's the issue now?" Barb jabbed a finger at me. "This man's parking illegally, blocking the road, and threatened me. Handle it." Davis turned to me. "ID and proof of ownership?" I handed over my papers. He scanned them, nodded. "You're the legal owner, but to keep things smooth, can you move the truck soon?" "Absolutely." I said, "Give me an hour." He tipped his hat. "Good enough." Then he faced Barb. "Ma'am, he's moving in and we'll shift the truck shortly. Don't call us unless it's a real emergency." Barb's face twisted with fury, but she was powerless. She shot me a death stare and stomped off, heels kicking up dust. I exhaled, relieved. But something told me this was only the start. What do you think of Barb's wild reaction? Have you ever clashed with a neighbor like her? Drop your craziest neighbor tales in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Where are you watching from? As I trudged back to my farmhouse that evening, The Kansas sunset cast a golden glow over the wheat fields, but my mind was far from the peaceful life I'd imagined. Barb's stunt with the cops still had my blood boiling. I'd come to Green Valley to escape the grind, not to tangle with some self-appointed dictator who thought she could control my every move. As I stacked boxes in the living room, the old wooden floors creaking under my boots, I couldn't shake the sense that this was just the opening shot in a bigger battle. Barb wasn't just a busybody, she was a problem. And in my 65 years, I'd learned problems like her don't back off unless you push back harder. The next morning, I woke to the smell of black coffee and the view of my new farm through the kitchen window. The field stretched out like a promise of freedom, but that promise felt tainted after yesterday's run-in. I hauled out the property documents and spread them across my dining table, a battered oak slab I'd brought from my old place. The Green Valley Community Association, some half-assed version of an HOA, had sent me a rule book thicker than a phone directory. Most of it was petty nonsense. No painting barns red, no more than 6 chickens, no leaving pitchforks outside overnight. But one section stopped me cold. The community pasture. It was a shared grazing field at the edge of town, supposedly open to all residents' livestock. But the rules were murky. Vague mentions of access fees and association approval for use. Bullshit, I muttered, sipping my coffee. I'd bought this farm to raise a few cows, maybe some goats, not to pay Barb for the right to use land that sounded like it belonged to everyone. I dealt with enough crooked suppliers in my farming days to smell a scam a mile away, and this stank to high heaven. I fired up my laptop and started digging into public records for Green Valley. The county website was a clunky mess, with half the links broken and pages that took forever to load. After an hour of cursing under my breath, I struck gold. The community pasture was listed as public land, managed by the Kansas Department of Agriculture for the benefit of all Green Valley residents. No private group, not even Barb's Precious Association, had the authority to restrict access or charge a dime. Well, I'll be damned, I growled, leaning back in my chair. Barb wasn't just overstepping, she was lying through her teeth, pocketing cash for something that wasn't hers to control. Paper proof was a start, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to take her down. Barb would laugh in my face if I just waved a few printouts at her. I needed the real dirt, the kind you only get from people who've lived under her thumb. So, I laced up my boots and headed out to talk to the neighbors. First stop was Earl, a wiry old guy in his 70s who lived a quarter-mile down the road. He was out by his fence, hammering a post into the ground, his overalls dusted with dirt. "Heard you met Barb," he said with a crooked grin when I introduced myself. "Yeah," I said, leaning against his rusted tractor. "She called the cops on my moving truck. What's her deal?" Earl spat tobacco into the dirt and chuckled. "Barb's the queen of the association. Runs this place like her personal kingdom. Fined me $200 last year for letting my goats wander too close to her pasture." "Pasture," I said, my ears perking up. "You mean that shared field? She's charging people to use it?" "Yup," he said, driving another nail into the post. $100 a month for cattle, $50 for goats. Says it's for maintenance. But I ain't seen a single fence post fixed with that money. Meanwhile, she's got a shiny new SUV. I felt my jaw tighten. "That's theft. Earl, she's ripping everyone off." He shrugged, his eyes weary. "Maybe, but she's got the town scared. Threatens lawsuits. Calls the cops. Even got one family kicked out for pushing back. Folks just pay up or keep quiet." I wasn't keeping quiet. I thanked Earl and headed across the field to meet Clara, a young widow who lived with her 2 kids. She was outside, tending a small garden, her hands caked with soil. When I brought up Barb, her face clouded over. "She's a nightmare," Clara said, keeping her voice low so her kids, playing nearby, wouldn't hear. "Last spring, I wanted to graze my 3 goats in the pasture. Barb said I needed a permit, $300 up front. When I couldn't pay, she reported me to the county for unapproved livestock. I almost lost my farm. You're shitting me, I said, my fists clenching. She went after your home over a few goats? Clara nodded, her eyes glistening. My son, Tim, loved watching those goats play in the field. Now he's scared to go near it. Barb's taken that joy from him. That hit me like a kick to the chest. This wasn't just about rules, it was about families. Kids. The kind of life I'd come here to build. Barb was stomping on all of it. I promised Clara I'd look into it and headed home, my mind churning like a combine harvester. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Clara's teary eyes, Earl's defeated shrug, the empty pasture that should have been alive with grazing animals. Barb wasn't just a pain in the ass, she was a thief, stealing from the heart of Green Valley. I hit the laptop again, diving deeper into state records. By midnight, I'd found a 1987 ordinance confirming the community pasture was public land, with free access guaranteed for all residents. Barb's access fees were a straight-up con, and I had the proof. But I knew proof alone wouldn't stop her. Barb would fight dirty. I could feel it in my bones. Sure enough, the next morning, I found a neon yellow violation notice taped to my front door. Unauthorized vehicle parking, $150 fine due by Friday. Signed by Barb. Of course. I laughed out loud, crumpling the paper. My truck was parked on my own damn driveway, not even touching the road. She was clutching at straws, trying to intimidate me. Then came the signs. By noon, new metal plaques were up around the pasture. Community Association members only. Violators will be prosecuted. I watched Barb from my porch, cruising around in her gleaming SUV, barking orders at a hired hand, hammering the signs into the ground. She looked like a general in her own little war, her sunglasses glinting as she scanned the town for troublemakers like me. The final straw came that evening. I was hauling a trash can to the curb when I spotted a security camera on a pole across the road, aimed straight at my front door. Not the street. Not her property. My damn house. You've got to be kidding me, I growled, stomping over to replace. She was on her porch, sipping iced tea like she owned the whole county. Barb, I shouted. What's with the camera? You spying on me now? She smirked, not even looking up. It's for community safety. Hank, if you're not breaking rules, you've got nothing to worry about. Bullshit, I snapped. You're watching my house like I'm a criminal. Take it down, or I'll rip it out myself. She stood, her voice cold as a winter wind. Threaten me again, and I'll have you arrested. I walked away before I said something I'd regret, but I was done playing nice. Barb wanted a war? She'd get one. I spent the next 2 nights digging through every database I could find. County records, state laws, even old newspaper clippings about Green Valley. By Wednesday, I had a stack of printouts proving the pasture was public, plus an email from a Kansas Department of Agriculture official confirming it. If someone's restricting access to public land, they wrote, that's a serious violation. Send us everything you've got. I was ready to bring the fight to her, but Barb wasn't slowing down. Thursday morning, she announced a Community Pasture Day for Saturday, an association-only event to celebrate our shared resource. Her name was plastered in bold on every flyer, hosted by Barb Wilson, community manager. It was a direct challenge, a way to rub her power in my face. But she didn't know I was coming with a stack of evidence and a plan to end her reign. The sun was just peeking over the Kansas horizon on Saturday morning as I stepped onto my porch, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a battered folder stuffed with evidence in the other. Across the fields, the community pasture was buzzing with Barb's Community Pasture Day, her big show to flaunt her control over Green Valley. Colorful banners waved in the breeze, proclaiming association members only, while a catering truck unloaded trays of sandwiches and a local news van idled nearby. Barb was out there, strutting in her pink blazer like she owned every blade of grass, barking orders at volunteers. She thought this was her victory lap, a way to cement her grip on the town and stick it to me after our run-in over the camera. Oh, Barb, you clueless tyrant, you just handed me the perfect stage to tear your whole scam apart. I'd spent the last 2 days sharpening my knives. My folder was packed with printouts from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, county records, and that 1987 ordinance proving the community pasture was public land, free for all Green Valley residents. I'd even gotten a call from a state official named Diane Carter, who sounded like she'd dealt with crooks like Barb before. "Hank," she'd said, her voice sharp as a pitchfork. "If what you're saying checks out, this is fraud. Plain and simple. Charging for public land access is illegal. Send us everything, and we'll have someone on standby if things get messy." I was ready to light the fuse and watch Barb's empire burn. As I marched toward the pasture, my boots kicking up dust on the gravel path. My pulse thumped like a tractor engine. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was for Clara's kids, who couldn't graze their goats without Barb's threats. It was for Earl, who'd paid fines for nothing. It was for every neighbor she'd bullied into submission. I wasn't just fighting for my right to raise a few cows. I was fighting for Green Valley's soul. The pasture was alive when I arrived. About 50 people milled around, families munching on barbecue, kids chasing each other through the grass, and a handful of Barb's loyalists clapping like trained dogs as she took the stage. Her microphone amplified her smug voice across the field. "Residents of Green Valley," she declared, her tone dripping with self-righteous bullshit. "Today we celebrate our pasture, a treasure we've protected from outsiders who don't share our values. As your community manager, I'm proud to keep this land exclusive for us." The crowd applauded, but I caught a few uneasy glances. Not everyone was drinking her Kool-Aid. I pushed through to the front, my folder clutched tight, and waited for the right moment. Barb was mid-sentence, preaching about preserving our way of life, when I raised my voice loud enough to cut through her nonsense. "Hey, Barb, before you keep lying about your pasture, how about you show us the deed that says you own it?" The crowd froze. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Kids paused their games. All eyes swung to me, then to Barb, whose face went from smug to furious in a heartbeat. The news crew, smelling blood, swiveled their camera toward me. "Excuse me," Barb screeched, her voice cracking like dry timber. "This is a private event, and you're trespassing. Get him out of here." Her security was her brother-in-law, Carl, a lanky guy in a polo shirt who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He shuffled toward me but stopped dead when I held up my folder. "Actually, Barb," I said, my voice booming across the field, "I've got proof right here, straight from the state, that the community pasture is public land. You've been charging people for something that belongs to all of us." The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones came out, some recording, others snapping photos. Barb's face turned the color of her blazer. "That's absurd," she shouted, gripping the microphone like a lifeline. "Those are fake documents." "He's trying to destroy our community with lies." I wasn't backing down. I pulled out the ordinance and waved it high. "This is from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, dated 1987. Says right here, the community pasture is public, with free access for all residents. You want to call that fake? Explain it to the state official I spoke to yesterday." The news reporter, a young guy named Ethan, stepped forward. Microphone ready. "Ms. Wilson," he said, "if these documents are legitimate, what gives the association the right to charge for pasture access?" Barb's eyes darted like a cornered coyote's. "This is our pasture," she screamed. "We've maintained it, protected it. This man is an outsider trying to ruin our town." But her voice was shaking now, and the crowd wasn't buying it. A farmer named Roy, who I'd seen selling eggs at the market, grabbed one of my printouts and read it. "Holy hell," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is real, state seal and all." "Barb, what have you been doing with our money?" The whispers turned into a roar. People started shouting. "Is this true? You charged me $200 to graze my cows. What else are you hiding?" Barb's composure was gone, her hands trembling as she clutched the microphone. Then, in a desperate move, she yelled, "I'm calling the police. This man is harassing me on private property." Here's where it gets wild. The same cops who'd shown up for my truck rolled in 15 minutes later, Sheriff Davis and his rookie partner. Davis took one look at the chaos, sighed, and walked over to me. "Hank, you causing trouble again?" "Nope," I said, handing him the folder. "Just exposing a thief. Take a look." He flipped through the documents, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. Then he turned to Barb, who was still ranting about trespassers and conspiracies. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, "these papers check out. The pasture's public land. Charging fees for it? That's illegal." The crowd gasped. Barb's jaw dropped, and for the first time, she had nothing to say. Ethan, the reporter, was filming it all, his camera capturing every second of her meltdown. "Ms. Wilson," he pressed, "can you explain why you've been collecting fees for public land?" Barb stammered. Her face now beet red. I was protecting our community. You don't understand the costs." But no one was listening. People were turning away, shaking their heads, some even laughing. Clara, the widow from across the field, pushed through the crowd, her eyes blazing. "You almost cost me my farm," she shouted. "My kids deserve that pasture as much as anyone." Before Barb could respond, a black SUV rolled up, and out stepped Diane Carter from the Department of Agriculture. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, carrying a clipboard and an air of authority that made Barb shrink. "Mr. Dawson," Diane said, shaking my hand, "we got your evidence. We're launching a full investigation into the association's activities. Effective immediately." Barb tried one last desperate play. "This is outrageous," she screamed. "I've done nothing but protect this pasture." But Diane cut her off. "Ma'am, we have records of your fees going back years. That's fraud. I suggest you get a lawyer." The crowd dispersed, leaving Barb alone by the stage, her banners flapping uselessly in the wind. Carl was packing up the catering tables, avoiding her gaze. I could have gloated, but I didn't. I'd won this round, but something told me Barb wasn't done. Her eyes locked on mine as I walked away, and I saw a flicker of something dangerous. Humiliation mixed with rage. This wasn't over. As I walked away from the community Pasture Day chaos, the Kansas wind carried the fading echoes of the crowd's shouts and Barb's frantic meltdown. The golden fields stretched out under the dusk. But the thrill of exposing her scam, her lies about the public pasture laid bare in front of Green Valley and a news crew, didn't feel as sweet as I'd expected. Barb's glare as I left, a mix of humiliated fury and something darker, stuck with me like a burr in my boot. I'd won this round, no question. But at 65, I'd seen enough bar fights to know that a cornered bully doesn't just roll over. They come back swinging, and Barb was the type to swing dirty. By the time I reached my farmhouse, the creaky porch steps groaning under my weight, I was bracing for her next move. Monday morning hit me like a bucket of cold water. I stepped outside to check my mailbox and found it overflowing with garish pink flyers, Barb's favorite color, screaming, "Beware community threat," with a grainy photo of me hauling boxes off my truck on moving day. The text was pure venom. "Hank Dawson, a dangerous outsider, is spreading lies to undermine our town's values. Report all suspicious activity to the association. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Dangerous? Me? A guy whose biggest thrill was a cold beer and a good harvest? But the humor fizzled when I saw the flyers plastered across Green Valley, on fence posts, barn doors, even the town's lone stoplight. Barb had turned my quiet arrival into a witch hunt, and I'd barely unpacked my dishes. "Goddamn lunatic," I muttered, tearing one off my gate. This wasn't just petty, it was borderline psychotic. I started snapping photos of every flyer, knowing I'd need evidence of her madness. By noon, she upped the ante. I went to check on my chickens and found my front yard trashed, empty feed bags strewn across the grass. My mailbox tipped over, and the word troublemaker spray painted in pink across my porch. A note was duct taped to my door. Leave Green Valley or pay the price. I stood there, fists balled, feeling the old temper I'd buried years ago clawing its way up. Barb was begging for a fight, and I wasn't about to back down. I called Sheriff Davis, who rolled up looking like he'd aged a decade since Saturday. "Hank," he said, scratching his gray stubble. "Barb's been blowing up our phones, claiming you're the one harassing her. Says you fabricated those pasture documents to frame her." "That's a load of horse shit," I snapped, showing him the photos, the note, and my trashed yard. "She's the one turning my farm into a damn crime scene." Davis sighed, scribbling in his notebook. "We'll look into it, but she's got the county clerk eating out of her hand. Keep records of everything, all right?" I wasn't about to let Barb run me off my own land, so I spent the afternoon rigging up a couple of cheap security cameras around my farmhouse. Smart move, because Tuesday night, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I checked the footage and there was Barb, creeping through my yard in a black tracksuit, looking like a discount cat burglar, clutching a spray can. She scrawled "Go home" across my barn, then tripped over a rake I'd left out, landing face first in the dirt with a muffled yelp. I couldn't help but chuckle, saving the video to my cloud. "Nice one, Barb," I muttered. "You just dug your own grave." Wednesday morning, I stormed into the sheriff's office with the footage and my pile of evidence. Flyers, photos, the threatening note. Davis watched the video, shaking his head as Barb flailed in the dirt. "This is vandalism, plain as day," he said. "But she's swearing you doctored it, claims you're out to ruin her reputation." "Ruin her reputation?" I laughed, loud enough to make the dispatcher jump. "Tell her to explain why her pink SUV's in the background, with that tacky community manager sticker on the windshield." Davis smirked, a rare crack in his tired demeanor. "We'll bring her in. Hank, stay out of her way for now." But Barb wasn't done making my life hell. That evening, I got a call from my internet provider. "Mr. Dawson," the rep said, "we've received a complaint that you're using our service to spread false information. We're suspending your account until further notice." "False information?" I roared, nearly crushing the phone. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Someone reported you for hacking and distributing forged documents," she said. I didn't need to guess who. It took 3 hours of arguing to get my Wi-Fi back. But the message was clear. Barb was throwing every dirty trick she had to break me. The whole thing was so absurd I almost laughed. Imagine. A 65-year-old farmer accused of being a cybercriminal? If I wasn't so pissed, I'd have framed the complaint for the sheer comedy. By Thursday, I was fed up. I called Diane Carter at the Department of Agriculture and sent her everything. Barb's flyers, the vandalism footage, even a screenshot of her gloating about pasture fees in an association newsletter. Diane's reply was like a shot of whiskey. "Hank, this woman's been fleecing Green Valley for years. We're sending a team tomorrow to investigate. If she's charging for public land, that's fraud. If she's vandalizing to intimidate you, that's a crime." I felt a grim thrill. But I knew Barb was desperate now, and desperate people are dangerous. Friday morning, I woke to an email from the association, signed by Barb, announcing an emergency town hall that evening to address threats to our community's unity. My name wasn't mentioned, but it might as well have been in bold. This was her last-ditch effort to rally her cronies and paint me as the bad guy. I grabbed my folder of evidence, my blood pumping. Barb wanted a showdown? I'd give her one she'd never forget. The community center was packed to the rafters when I arrived, the air thick with tension and the smell of cheap coffee. Neighbors filled the chairs, whispering and stealing glances at me as I took a seat near the back. Barb stood at the front, her pink blazer screaming for attention, her sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara. She launched into a speech about safeguarding our traditions and stopping outsiders who lie to divide us. Her voice was shrill, like a kettle about to boil over. "Friends," she said, clutching the podium. "We're under attack by a man who wants to ruin our pasture and our way of life. I've uncovered proof that Hank Dawson is working with outsiders to dismantle our association." The room gasped, and all eyes turned to me. I stood, my temper flaring like a brush fire. "That's a damn lie, Barb." I held up my folder. "I've got state documents proving the pasture's public. You've been stealing from these folks, charging them for land you don't own." The crowd exploded, some yelling at Barb, others at me. It got awkward when Carl, her brother-in-law, tried to play peacemaker and accidentally knocked over a table of donuts, sending them rolling across the floor. A few folks snickered, and I couldn't help but grin at the absurdity. Then, the doors swung open, and Diane Carter marched in with 2 state officials. The room went silent as she stepped to the podium, her presence like a storm cloud. "I'm Diane Carter, Kansas Department of Agriculture," she said, her voice slicing through the chaos. "We've reviewed Mr. Dawson's evidence. The community pasture is public land. The association's fees are illegal. Effective immediately. All restrictions are lifted." The crowd roared, but the real kicker came next. Diane held up a file. "We've also found records showing Ms. Wilson collected $35,000 in fees, deposited into a personal account." She paused, letting the bombshell sink in. "That's embezzlement. A felony." Barb's face went white as a sheet, her mouth flapping uselessly. "That's a lie," she squeaked, but her voice was drowned out by shouts. Earl stood red-faced. "You took $400 from me for grazing." Clara, tears streaming, yelled, "You threatened my kids' home." Even Carl, brushing donut crumbs off his shirt, muttered, "I told you, Barb. This was dumb." Sheriff Davis walked in, handcuffs in hand. "Barb Wilson," he said, "you're under arrest for vandalism, false reports, and suspected fraud." As he cuffed her, Barb shrieked, "Hank set me up." But the crowd was done with her. I stood there watching her empire collapse, but her wild, desperate eyes told me this wasn't the end. I stood in the community center as Sheriff Davis led Barb away in handcuffs, her pink blazer looking more like a straitjacket with every step. The crowd's shouts and whispers swirled around me, a chaotic mix of outrage and disbelief that echoed across the Kansas fields outside. The news crew was packing up, Ethan the reporter giving me a thumbs up like I'd just won a prize fight. And maybe I had. Barb's scam, charging folks for the public community pasture, was exposed. Her power shattered, her lies laid bare for all of Green Valley to see. But as I trudged back to my farmhouse under the starry sky, my boots heavy on the gravel, a strange weight settled in my chest. I'd wanted justice, not destruction. Watching Barb's empire crumble didn't feel as good as I'd thought it would, and I couldn't shake the image of her desperate, wild eyes. The next few weeks in Green Valley were like a spring thaw after a brutal winter. The pasture came alive again, cows and goats grazing freely, kids running through the grass. Neighbors chatting without fear of Barb's clipboard. Earl, now interim head of the community association, wasted no time. He tore down Barb's members-only signs and replaced them with wooden plaques reading, "Community pasture free for all." Clara brought her goats back, and her son, Tim, was out there every day, laughing as he tossed a ball for them to chase. I watched from my porch, sipping coffee, my old fishing hat tipped back, feeling like maybe I'd done something right. Hell, I even let a couple of my own cows loose in the pasture, their bells clanking as they wandered. It was the life I'd come here for. But Barb's shadow lingered like a stubborn weed. Her farmhouse, just down the road, sat dark, curtains drawn, driveway empty except for a for sale sign that went up overnight. Earl filled me in over coffee one morning. Her brother-in-law, Carl, split, he said, shaking his head. Moved to Wichita the day after the arrest. Couldn't handle the shame. Barb's holed up with a friend in Topeka, dodging lawsuits and reporters. Word is she's broke. I took a sip, staring out at the fields. She earned it, I said, but my voice was softer than I meant. Still losing everything like that? That's a hard fall. Earl nodded, his eyes distant. She wasn't always like this, Hank. After her husband left her, the association gig became her whole world. She got obsessed with control, like it was all she had. Messed up, but kind of sad. Sad wasn't a word I'd have used a month ago, but now it hit me like a bale of hay. Barb had made my life hell. Flyers, vandalism, fake complaints. But hearing she was crashing on a friend's couch, her life in tatters, stirred something in me. I'd lost my own wife, Mary, to a heart attack 8 years back, and I knew what it felt like to lose your anchor. Justice was one thing, but crushing someone completely? That wasn't what I'd set out to do. Then came Wednesday, and everything flipped upside down. I was out fixing a fence post, sweat dripping under the Kansas sun, when I saw a figure walking along the pasture's edge. It was Barb, but not the Barb I knew. No pink blazer, no sunglasses, just a plain gray sweatshirt and jeans. Her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked small, fragile, like a scarecrow left out too long. She was staring at the grazing cows, hands in her pockets, and for a moment, I thought she might just keep walking into the field and disappear. I set down my hammer, grabbed 2 cans of soda from my cooler, and headed over. My boots crunched on the grass, and she jumped when she heard me. "Hank," she said, her voice barely a whisper, eyes red and puffy. "I didn't expect to see you." "Didn't expect to see you either," I said, offering her a soda. "Figured you could use one." She stared at the can like it was a trick, then took it, her hands trembling. We sat on a rickety bench by the pasture, watching the cows graze. For a long minute, neither of us spoke. The only sound the clinking of bells and the distant hum of a tractor. Finally, Barb broke the silence. "Why are you being decent to me?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I trashed your yard, lied about you, tried to drive you out. Why the hell would you sit here with me?" I leaned back, cracking open my soda. "Because I ain't you. Barb, I didn't fight you to ruin your life. I fought you because you were stealing from folks. Clara, Earl, kids like Tim. But I don't get my kicks from watching you crash and burn." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Crash and burn? Hank, I've lost everything. Carl's gone. My house is gone. My friends won't talk to me. I'm sleeping on a couch in Topeka, and I've got lawsuits piling up. I'm done." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her she'd built her own cage. But another part, the part that remembered Mary's voice telling me to be the bigger man, kept me quiet. You screwed up, Barb, I said finally. Big time. But that don't mean you're finished. People can change. Question is, do you want to? She didn't answer, just stared at the pasture, tears rolling down her cheeks. I left her there with the soda and headed back to my farm, my head a tangle of thoughts. I'd spent weeks building a case to bury her, but now I was wondering if justice was more than just winning. The next morning, Diane Carter from the Department of Agriculture called. Hank, she said, Barb's facing serious charges, fraud, embezzlement, maybe jail. But we've also found evidence that other association members knew about the fees. They're trying to pin it all on her. But we're auditing the whole operation. The association might lose its charter. Lose the charter? I said, my stomach sinking. What happens then? No one to manage community stuff. Roads, fences, utilities, she said. It'd be a mess unless someone steps up to rebuild. I hung up, my mind racing. I'd wanted to free the pasture, not burn the whole system down. But then I thought of Mary, who always said, if you break something, you fix it. That afternoon, I called Earl and laid out a plan. What if we rebuild the association? I said. Make it fair, transparent, no bullshit. For Clara, Tim, everyone? Earl laughed. You, Hank, running an association after all this? Not running it, I said. Just helping set it right. Over the next month, I became the guy I never expected to be. I met with neighbors, Clara, Roy, even old Mrs. Harper, who'd been fined for her tomato plants. We drafted a new charter, open finances, free pasture access, no single person calling the shots. Diane helped ensure the state backed us, and the old association board either quit or skipped town, too embarrassed to stay. Then came the twist that floored me. One evening, as I was grilling steaks for a neighborhood potluck by the pasture, a car pulled up. Barb stepped out, looking like a shadow of her old self, no makeup, no blazer, just a plain sweater and an envelope. She walked up, nervous as a colt. Hank, she said, I wrote something for the town. Will you read it? I took the envelope. Wary. Inside was a handwritten letter to Green Valley. It was raw, no excuses. An apology for the fees, the threats, the lies. She wrote about her divorce, how she'd clung to power to feel whole, and how she'd lost herself. I'm not asking for forgiveness. It ended. I just want you to know I'm sorry, and I'm trying to start over. I read it at the next town meeting. The room went quiet. Then Clara stood, tears in her eyes. I hated you, Barb, she said. But this means something. Others nodded, some clapped. Barb wasn't there, she'd already left for good. But her letter was like a final rain, washing away the last of her shadow. Standing by the pasture that night, watching families laugh and kids play, I realized Mary was right. Justice isn't about crushing someone. It's about giving them a chance to make things right and building something better from the ashes. Green Valley wasn't just a place to live anymore, it was home. Holy cow, what a ride! Did Barb's apology shock you as much as it did Hank? Drop your wildest neighbor drama in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Smash that like button if you're all about justice with a side of redemption. And subscribe to HOA Karen Files for more epic showdowns every week.